Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another star-studded episode of the Moviescramble podcast. I say star-studded because we are here in their entirety today. There is no absentees, there is no apologies. Well, there's going to be plenty of apologies, but they'll come later. I'm your host, Thomas, and I'm joined by John and Mary today. But since you're ill, Mary, we'll go to John first. How are you, John?
Yeah, good. I'm just back from a staycation, as it seems to be all over the papers, and I hate that fucking word, but I said it anyway. I was up in Inverness for 5 days, enjoying the sunshine and the various sights, and it was lovely. Really nice time, very refreshing. Had lots to drink and went and saw lots of things, apart from Nessie, obviously, because at this time of year, Nessie is in Nova Scotia through the undersea tunnel that it uses in order to travel back and forth. But yes, all good. Yeah, looking forward to our chat today.
Yeah, it's a great part of the world, isn't it? Up at Inverness and the Highlands, and that it's a great pace of life. It's just nice and quiet, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was good. One thing though, you had to book everything, every single thing you had to book because of restrictions and because of increased crowds as well. But yeah, it's well worth it. I would recommend it to anybody. Really would.
Speaking of COVID, Mary, how are you?
I'd just like to point out for our listener that I didn't have COVID, but COVID jag number 2 has definitely nearly knocked me off my perch. I still feel quite hot and quite flu-like, but it just, horrendous. 2 days of literally just sleeping, migraines, sore arm, and just, I honestly had fever dreams. As I said to you guys, I woke up and thought I was at the bottom of the Grand Canyon and I was going to have to climb my way back out. I was so delirious with how hot I was. It was ridiculous. But still, I'm not, glad that I got 2 jags. Go and get your jags, people. Don't be a tinfoil hat and, do your bit, etc., etc.
Yeah, we don't want to get too preachy in the podcast, but please do get vaccinated because it is better than the alternative.
Absolutely.
But we're not here to discuss vaccinations or COVID, although I do think we do get a bit preachy on that in the past, but that's another story. We're here to talk about the 2021 British horror film by Prano Bailey Bond, Censor.
There's this actress. I've got this feeling that it's Nina, my sister. If someone did take her, then they're still out there.
You've never been clear on exactly what you remember.
You'd be surprised what the human brain can edit out when it can't handle the truth. Someone's losing the plot.
This is a very slow burn of a movie, and this is probably one that would have actually passed me by if it was not for yourself, Mary, that had mentioned it. But the plot is set in 1985 in Britain, and we have our film censor Enid, played by Niamh Algar, who discovers an indie horror movie that's, when she's watching it, really makes her think about her sister's real-life disappearance. She becomes a little bit obsessed with it based on that, and it starts to become this puzzle that the more she kind of picks at it, the more it unravels, and the lines between kind of reality and fiction start to kind of blur for her as she falls down this rabbit hole, which in her mind is just trying to kind of find to get to the bottom of the mystery, what happened to her sister. But as the puzzle unravels, our mind seems to go with it, and trying to go to spoiler with it, but it's a very psychological horror, and it really gets into your head. Mary, what was your thoughts on it as a film?
So I really wanted to see this movie because I was a big fan of Niamh Algar in The Virtues, which is the Shane Meadows TV show that was on Channel 4 a while ago. And I happened to catch a couple of trailers for it a little while ago, and I thought, this seems right up my street. I really liked it because it was a psychological horror. So I think if you're maybe going into it thinking, it's about video nasties, you're going to see loads and loads of blood and guts and all that sort of thing. It's probably not going to be your type of movie. I think if you enjoyed Rose Glass's Saint Maud last year, you're probably going to quite like this as well. It's very character driven. It's very psychological. It's a very slow burn, and actually really exciting to look at. It reminded me of a Giallo movie. There's kind of moments in it I was like, this is as if Dario Argento had directed this. It was a really stylistic, really well paced, really kind of ambiguous movie as well. I think it's one that's going to get a lot of people thinking. Without going into spoiler territory, I think it's something that is very open ended, and is you're kind of when you think about it, after you've watched it, you're like, how much of that actually happened and how much of that is, this kind of, because it's so hyper stylized, it almost feels like you're watching a movie within a movie type of thing. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent, really sort of character driven, and Neve Algar, who was so good previously, really drives this film as well with her performance as Enid. She's just fantastic, and I think that when you look at the little nuggets of the kind of real life setting of how trying times were in the 80s with these kind of culture clashes and strikes and all the economic uncertainty and how these video nasties came about, it just sort of brings it all to life as well and makes you kind of, it's not a nostalgic look back at the 80s, put it that way, but it really sort of, it brings all the sort of different strands of the movie together. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that, especially what you're saying about if you like Saint Maud, but you like that kind of style of movie, this will be right up your street. John, how was your knowledge of the film before you approached it, or did you go in fairly blind like myself?
I went in totally blind. I hadn't seen any trailers for it. I'd heard a couple of interviews with some of the principals, but apart from that, I hadn't really heard very much at all. So it was a total surprise to me. It's the kind of film that I love because it's, like Mary said, it's very ambiguous. You can take different things from it. Now, I've read some reviews of it where people have been very, very disappointed in it because it's very slow paced and it doesn't really live up to what I suspect is their ideas from the trailer of it. I suspect the trailer was more sort of not action and drama filled, Mary. I don't know. I'm not kind of sure where that kind of was, but I suspect that they didn't see the film that they were being sold in that respect. But yes, loved it. I thought it was kind of creepy without being overly creepy. It wasn't particularly bloody, like you said, Mary. There's not a lot of blood or anything actually on screen. It reminded me in that respect of the Peter Strickland film Barbarian Sound Studio.
Oh yes, I love that film.
Where it's the guy that's doing the sound effects for all the horror films, and you see the camera always focuses on him, and it's all these things going on, and he's like smashing melons and all this sort of stuff to actually make the sounds that go into these horror films. It was very reminiscent of that. Was that thunder in the background there?
Yeah. Perfect timing for when you're talking about sound effects. That was good.
I love the fact that it was set in the 80s as well, because it was the 80s in a lot of respects were sort of hangover from the 70s, the sort of the glam era where things were like overly bright and there was a lot of glitter going about in so many respects. It was very dark and grey and muted and everything. All the telephones are all muted. They were brown, for God's sake. You had brown telephones sitting in your house and all this. And every time that you saw the main character in sort of real life, it was all brown and it was grey and people were smoking. There was no colour in it at all. And then there was the sequences where was it a dream or was it in our mind or whatever? And they were filled with colour. There was colour saturation, the giallo effect. Lots of greens and reds and everything to signify blood and family and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, I was totally taken in with it. I loved the movie. I thought it was really good.
Excellent. You mentioned about the kind of the slow burn aspect, and a lot of critics were we kind of put off with that. It feels to me that there's almost this subgenre of British horror movies that comes under this style, this very slow burn, creating a very atmosphere of unease, and it doesn't necessarily always build to some crescendo, but when it does, it's very effective. And the kind of films that come to mind, you've got this, we mentioned Saint Maud, Kill List, I think was very similar in style to that, although you could argue more kind of happens in that movie. There was also In the Earth I went to see recently this year as well. Again, you could put all these films under the same umbrella. And I did think when I was watching this, it did remind me of Ben Wheatley's movies. Maybe that's unfair to the director and unfair to this style of British horror, but it did remind me of his movies. Maybe because Michael Smiley was in it as well. He seems to pop up quite a lot in Ben Wheatley's films. But yeah, I mean, watching this movie, I can take these films or leave them. It needs to be really exceptional for it to grip me. Like Kill List, for example, I loved. A lot of the other movies I kind of mentioned, not so much. Watching this, it didn't really do much to kind of grab me. But the last 15 to 20 minutes, I was blown away. And I would rather have a film that leaves me with a good ending than really good with a bad ending, because you always remember the ending. And it just became more surreal in a good way rather than a kind of like, let's go crazy and weird for the sake of it, which I felt at times it was in danger of doing, but the payoff really worked for it. Mary, what did you think at the end? Did you think it earned its ending?
Absolutely. I think the whole idea of this film is it's funny because they talk about censoring these films because it was bad for people's mental health to be exposed to such trauma. Now, Enid's character is exposed to trauma or whatever on a daily basis because that's her job. She is a censor. And I feel like this film's reflective of that because you're essentially watching her mental decline throughout the film. She's coming to terms with these images that she's seen, but also piecing together this whole idea that her sister is missing, her parents are willing to declare her dead, and that she's really, somewhere in her head, she thinks, or maybe she has, we don't know, that she's responsible for this loss of this sister. So I think that the ending, we'll probably get into it later, but there's a really clever thing done with the aspect ratio as well, sort of 2/3 through the film as well. And I think this all builds towards this thing of, she's losing her grip on reality. So what are we seeing here? Are we seeing things through Enid's eyes, the way we've seen up until this point? Or are we watching something that's going on inside her head? Are we watching a video nasty being made? We don't know. And I think that when it builds and builds and builds, then you get those kind of short, sharp cuts at the end, almost similar to that kind of like flick moment in St. Maud, where you literally, obviously see she's on fire. I kind of jumped the first time the first little cut came in and it's the black and white, and I was like, oh God, this is not what's happening then. And it really, to me, I thought it was so well executed because it really leaves you with this feeling of, I have no idea if what I've just seen is real, and we've been taken into Enid's decline, essentially.
Yeah, you can really see that, can't you? Because it's almost as if a lot of it's from her perspective and nobody else's, because the camera follows her everywhere. It's always in her presence. I don't think there are any scenes that she's not involved in. So you're never really leaving her presence, so you don't know whether it is real or whether it's not real. And again, it's quite ambiguous. You're left to your own decision on this throughout the film. I don't think it's really played out in any. I'm not giving anything away here, but I don't think it's really sort of signposted one way or the other.
I should just point out as well, sorry, that the trailer for this film, if you actually go back and watch it, kind of makes it look like a sort of jumpy horror slashy type of, like a video nasty type of film almost. So I think if this is why I kind of said that if you're expecting that, you're probably not going to enjoy it, because it definitely is almost, I don't want to say a character study because that makes it sound really boring, and it's definitely not, but it's very character driven, almost like a psychological drama, maybe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's very character driven, but not necessarily a character study, because we don't find out a lot about the character Enid here. We know what we know, and that's all we need. And it's not so much about her as a person; it's her actions. That's what I kind of feel anyway. It's like, I wouldn't say it's a character study, but very, very character driven. And as you're saying, John, as well, she seems to be in every single scene for the most part, which again, just going to make a reference to Joker there. That's what happened to Joker as another film, that kind of ambiguity, the unreliable narrator, so to speak. And it works if you have the person. You can't have subplots. You can't just go away to two different characters speaking independent of the main person, because that would just take you out of their story completely. Apparently, there's a deleted scene for Joker, actually. I mean, his neighbour, Zazie Beetz.
Zazie Beetz.
Yeah, there's a scene later on, apparently, where you see the riots happening, you see her in her apartment watching it. Now, is he imagining she's watching it, or is she really watching it in that aspect? So, yeah, it would have worked. And I think here it really it's a tight movie in that kind of aspect. There's not a lot of kind of waste. A very short runtime as well. It's about an hour and 20 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely less than the 90. I think it was like 80 or something like that. Yeah, definitely.
And I say, I kind of thought towards midpoint it was maybe a bit too weird for the sake of being weird with the introduction of the director and things like that, because I was starting to kind of question not so much the reality of the situation, but is this just being surreal now? But like I said, without getting too much gas, but I think the ending, and especially when the final third kind of happens, it really pays off everything that's came before it and makes sense in its own weird way.
I love that quote where she meets the director and he says, people blame us for creating the horror and they don't realise that the horror's all around them. And it's a wee bit on the nose, right? I get that. But when you look back at the rest of the film and there's these little, the underpasses that she's working are grim as fuck, the sexual politics at work are clearly, even the sexual politics of video nasties themselves, the way women are, treated. There's the whole setup with her family, you know, even just the grim thing of the way she picks the skin off her thumb, like the whole film has been building up to this point that, you know, these movies are the least of your worries. Just look at what's happening outside in the world. And it's just, I love that. As I say, it's a little on the nose, but I loved how it all kind of built up to that. And then you're sort of let loose into this, you know, kind of final third of the film or whatever. But I just, I could rave about this all day. Clearly, I'm clearly set up to just talk about this all the time. But I was totally taken in by it. I really was.
Which is fine. I don't really mind the message being on the nose either, because it's what the film's about.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong. Sometimes when a message is a bit too blunt on the nose, sometimes it's required.
It was interesting when you talk about it letting loose in the final third. I like the way that it built up that by the use of sort of camera techniques. It's a sort of standard horror technique that you get the over-the-shoulder shot. It's always shot from behind. Anytime she was walking, it seemed to be from behind, and it was always looking at her. And then there was a couple instances where it switched suddenly, and I think there was one where she was walking down the passageway. I'm assuming it was like a railway station or a tunnel to like a subway station, and just behind her were two lights, and it looked as if there were eyes actually looking at her. And that was very creepy. And then she repeated that about 15 minutes later, but in a slightly different way as well. But again, it was like two eyes sort of looking at her and sort of almost like judging her. It was almost like, for me, it was like questioning her sanity, if you like, and sort of saying, well, you know, these are the eyes that are watching you, kind of thing. And I thought that was particularly good. And the eyes seemed to play a very important part in the film in general, because it's always seen, everything that you see on the screen is from the perspective, as I said, from the perspective of Enid, but they're always watching stuff. They're always watching films, or there's a lot of close-ups of them, and it's always focused on the top half of their face and everything as well. And when she looks through that video cassette, she's watching that, and when she pauses it, because she thinks it's somebody she recognises, it's the eyes that she reacts to. She says, I know those eyes, I've seen those before. And it seems to be all the way through it, there's that sort of wee element to it, which is quite subtle. And then obviously it's the voyeuristic thing with the final third, when it just goes, we're just going to go crazy.
Even just the fact that, like, so she's a glasses wearer as well. Like, she puts her glasses on to watch these movies. So when some of the shots I just thought were beautiful, the way she was framed. But some of the shots when she's watching these movies, you're seeing literally the reflection of the cinema screen back. So there's so much going on with how she's viewing things and how she's seeing things, and can we trust what she's, it's so well done. It really is. Yeah,
it's very stylistic. Stylistically, it's a very, very clever movie, and how it's shot and its use of graphics and imagery in that. And I didn't love it the same way as you did, Mary. I enjoyed it, as I say, especially the final third for me really, really redeemed it. I think some of the critics have been a bit harsh based on that, because as, not sound too pretentious here, but as a piece of art, you know, it's a very well constructed movie with a lot of depth to it. It's just not in your face, crazy, violent horror. And as you mentioned earlier, maybe people expected that based on the theme of the movie being regarding video nasties. Those movies did tend to be really kind of over the top and gory. This isn't.
I also think in a way we've not become immune to video now, because I'm sure as we'll talk, you know, we've touched on films that we personally wouldn't choose to see because of, you know, how graphic they are. But I do think to a certain extent, as horror has evolved and, you know, rating systems have changed and how we consume media is different, I do think we have become a little bit immune to kind of slasher horror or blood or gore or all that sort of thing. And so when you're presented with something that's actually a little bit more psychological, it's almost like that's harder to process because it's getting under your skin, as opposed to, you know, that blood and guts isn't real.
Yeah. It's interesting, the fact, obviously, that video nasties were getting blamed, or just even the fact that they were coined as video nasties. They were used as a political tool, and the film touches on that a couple of times, in that the censors are under real pressure to basically ban as many films as possible. And at one point, the sort of head of the censor says, if there's any doubt at all, just ban it. Don't even, you know, you don't need to have a debate about it. Just it doesn't get passed through. And it's all got to do with the political agenda at the time. It was to try and detract from the fact that the government was in real crisis in the early 80s. so they look for somebody to blame for all of society's ills. We've seen it time and time again with video games, with with Lady Chatterley's lover, things like that. Things that are obscene, things that they say people are going to use in order to commit crimes. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I lived in Renfrewshire. There wasn't an awful lot of axe murdering going on.
Driller killers.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of that going on around about that time, so I think I was fairly immune from it, as I think most people probably were. I remember living through it at the time, because I am obviously considerably older than you young Turks sitting there. And it was ridiculous at the time that they were blaming all sorts of films. And what happened was these films get built up in such a way that everybody wanted to see them, and they were ultimately left disappointed when they actually saw them, because it wasn't in any way as realistic as they were made out to be.
No.
They were as gory as they were made out to be. Like The Exterminator, for instance, where a guy gets fed through a big mincing machine. I saw that one and thought, yeah, it's pretty gruesome, but it wasn't anything. It was fairly tame. If you watched it now, you'd be going, yeah, very tame, considering what you can see in Netflix right now.
Interesting if you kind of hit all those kind of points there, because I don't know if you've seen Fear Street.
I have, yeah. I was just thinking about that there, because I just watched the first one of that yesterday, and it was cracking, really good. But yeah, there's some really good axe murdering going on in that one as well. Yeah,
there's a particular death scene in that, and it just takes you totally by surprise, because the film's tame, but it's very much in a Scream type of vein. And this murder comes kind of out of left field a little, and you're like, whoa, I can't believe they just did that.
No, I used to watch them actually. I've seen mixed reviews on Twitter, but I mean,
I didn't like it personally.
Right, okay. We kind of touched on what we were saying though. Like we have access to so much stuff now. We can watch so much stuff at home that you wouldn't get this kind of under the counter. Get not a dirty movie like a gory movie in a paper bag to take home and watch with your mates and stuff like that, because it doesn't exist, because we all consume media differently now. But it's kind of funny when you think about it, because there's that lovely montage at the start of the film where she uses clips from these so-called video nasties, and even now you're looking at it and you're like, well, that looks like ketchup. Like, that doesn't. How is that ever terrifying? But it's funny how things change.
Exactly. You might use it in the Barrowlands, and try to get some kind of dodgy banned film. I don't mean like a blue movie, so to speak. I can't use that term. But as we talk about later, there's plenty of films that have been banned, just that you can now see quite easily. Doesn't necessarily mean there's anything kind of saucy about them. Or just
you keep going back to this. Films. Have you noticed this, Mary? Keeps going back to. He knows all the terms, saucy and blue, and
I'm starting to sound like a fucking Carry On film.
I feel like we're going to get a childhood revelation about the first time Sammy found porn in a bush in the park.
I mean, is that not how everybody of their generations discover?
Starts off it, yeah.
Nowadays these kids don't know what it's like for their internets, their PlayStations. But yeah, maybe they had an idea with 1985 with censoring things. But anything else you want to discuss with this movie? I think we've kind of exhausted all the kind of main points, unless
only just the soundtrack to it.
Oh, the soundtrack's good. Yeah, good point.
There wasn't much of it to begin with. It was very sort of muted, and it really kicked in sort of halfway through. And it wasn't so much a soundtrack; it was more a soundscape, if you like, because it took in elements that were actually within the film itself, and it added to them, and it was like lots of deep bass rumbling and things like that, sort of eerie synths and all that, which is quite reminiscent of a lot of 80s stuff. It reminded me a wee bit of some of the John Carpenter stuff for some of his earlier films as well, without the sort of the string stabs and things like that. It was quite atmospheric, but it really, really worked. It really fitted in very, very nicely, especially in the dream sequences. I loved that bit.
I also just thought it was a really neat touch, as you will read in my Moviescramble review when it comes out, that just throughout the film we're talking about, Enid's mental decline. She starts off, she's very prim and proper, and she's got the hair in the bun and everything's very neat. And just as the film goes on, it's like one strand of hair comes out, and then it's like two strands of, and she's literally just this visual representation of how, we're sort of spiraling with her. But I kind of loved this, because when I think of the 80s, I think of like neon and crimped hair and like leg warmers and that sort of thing, the kind of Stranger Things type of 80s,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean? And I've never really looked at God's Britain in the 80s just like so fucking grim here. Like we obviously missed the bright, colourful phase because it's like there's rubbish piling up in the streets, there's political unrest, everyone, like when you see like even just the queues of her, like and when she's the queues to get on the like the subway and when she's getting the bus home, everyone just looks bloody miserable. It just looks like everyone's drawn in. It just looks such a grim time, and in essence, obviously, just the perfect setting for this particular movie.
No, I think that's a fair point. There's not a kind of lot of nostalgia in this movie. We usually kind of associate with 80s movies, but the movie is still very much an 80s film. There's no getting away with that, and it's just a different take on a time that's almost been romanticised in many ways. Whereas, well, there was also this part of it where we're not talking about this really dark, horrible part, because as we'll discuss a lot of these films that did get banned and stuff, total knee-jerk reactions to things. But yeah, there was other parts of the decade, not just all tight leather pants and glam rock.
You and I had very different 80s, obviously. I don't think don't think I went near anything like that. But if you've got photos, please share it. Oh, I suppose that'll be for your OnlyFans, won't it? Yeah. Aye. That won't be for general consumption.
Anything else regarding this movie, or are we happy to put a pin in it?
Yep, good for me,
Happy to put a pin in it and obviously thoroughly recommend as well.
Nice.
I say I would recommend this movie. It's not my favourite movie of the year, I'm not going to lie. I find these kind of slow burn British horrors of this. I want a name for a subgenre, I really do. I find it very, very hit and miss. And watching this in the house, even as a short runtime, I did find my mind starting to wander a little bit, even about the halfway mark. But I'm really going to stick with it because, yeah, I absolutely loved the ending. I thought stylistically and technically, it was just incredible to see, and it was really effective and quite terrifying, to be honest. John?
Yep, yeah, I would recommend it because, well, mainly it's my type of film. I can understand why some people wouldn't like it, but they're not my friends and I don't want them to be my friends, so that's fine by me. I've got enough friends that like these sort of things. Yeah, give it a watch. It's only 82 minutes long. Yeah, it's worth that amount of anybody's time, and you can tell that the director really has a passion for the subject as well. It really comes through very, very nicely indeed. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, that's kind of unanimous from us, isn't it, in a way? Go and check this film out. Also, you're also supporting British horror, which is always important to do, regardless, even if you don't like the film or not, if you don't fancy it. But no, it's a good movie. Definitely worth checking out. Just please be warned, it's not going to be your typical balls-in-your-face horror movie. I don't know why I came up with that phrase there.
What kind of films have you been watching, Sammy? I feel like your brain's on something different today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I've got to leave it at that.
Yeah, wouldn't like to speculate.
Let's leave that the cutting room floor. But as this movie does revolve and center on the theme of censorship and video nasties, we have decided to discuss our favourite movies, or notable movies, I should say, that have been banned. Doesn't necessarily be in the UK. Could have been caused some controversy somewhere in the world. Doesn't necessarily have been banned as such, but I think all the films we discussed have been banned in one way or another. Yes, if it's controversial, it's going to be banned in some way, I suppose. But I believe I'm up first, so I will go with my first pick, which is a film I don't even like, to be honest with you. It's not necessarily that I don't agree it should have been banned, but I do agree a lot with the criticism of it, and that is The Human Centipede 2, full sequence. Now, The Human Centipede first movie was carried in promotional material by a lot of hype, and the fact that it was this crazy idea, the tagline was like 100% medically accurate and things like that, and people really wanted to see it because they're like, this guy's going to turn people into a human centipede. It was a very unique horror movie that the word of mouth carried it alone. It's quite fun in its own way. It's a bit over the top. It's a bit daft. This movie isn't. It's set in a world where The Human Centipede is a movie, and there's this guy, very creepy guy, becomes obsessed with the film and wants to create his own human centipede. And it's really kind of like over the top in a bad way. It's excessively violent and gross. The BBFC called it undoubtedly tasteless and disgusting, and actually believed it was potentially in breach of the Obscene Publications Act, and at first refused to give it a classification. Now all that did, this is 2011, was create a buzz around the movie, especially the fact it was a sequel. So anybody that knew of the first one or seen the first one really wanted to see the second one. The BBFC, unfortunately, did the market material for this film and did eventually release it after some cuts. It's not a good film. It really isn't. But yeah, it was banned. I don't believe it should have been banned. Obscene Publications Act, again, that law in itself is the films that come under that. I think that should be used for real extreme examples. This is a horror film, and I don't think anybody's going to be influenced by it to go and start their own fucking Human Centipede because they've watched it. Although, interesting enough, that is the plot of this film. But yeah. Stupid banning, but they did release it. And as the director even said, it's like, my dear people, it's a fucking movie. It's all fictional. It's not real. It's make-believe. It's art. Don't really believe that's the last part, but there are parts he's right. And as he said, give people their own choice to watch it or not. And I agree with that. And yeah, it did get released. And I think after that, people went, well, it was really that, because again, this day and age, especially even 2011, people have seen much worse. Have either of you seen it?
I do not want to see a film where someone's mouth is sewn to someone's arsehole, ever. I don't need that in my life. I don't know. I find I've missed it. I didn't watch the first one. I just thought this doesn't seem like my thing at all. And by the time the second one came out, and I saw that image of the guy that's in the second one, I can't remember his name. He's got the big thick glasses on, and he just looked grubby, and I was like, definitely fucking not. So but you're right though, Simmy. When you think about things like this, the BBFC almost sort of do your publicity for you, because it's like, no, it's too obscene for anyone to ever be exposed to it or whatever. It's definitely not art though, is it? Nah. It's not for me. No thanks.
Nah, I'm not convinced it's that. Did you see, John?
I did. I only watched about half of it because I just thought it was shite. It wasn't even. Oh, sorry, pure choice of words there, obviously, but it was just rubbish. And like you say, the publicity was done for them, not just in this country, because obviously if it gets banned in one country, then it's going to have a much bigger audience in other countries as well, just through the fact that it's banned in the UK, splattered across all the posters. Come and see it. But yeah, it's the hype did it no favours, and it was just not a particularly good film. It obviously did what it was supposed to do, made a lot of money for filmmakers, but no, it was just nonsense. It was just rubbish.
Yeah, even so much so that it got a third one, which again was, the tone was totally different yet again, but more in line with the first one, but very much different for this one. It just didn't work. It didn't work, in my opinion, but yeah. Oh, Christ, who's next?
I think it's me. My first pick is 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was banned in, a whole big list: Brazil, France, Germany, Australia, Canada, Finland, Iceland, the UK, Sweden, and Singapore for graphic depictions of violence, gore, and cruelty. And I always find this really strange, because to me, Texas Chainsaw is one of the least gory horror films I think I've ever seen. You don't see anything or virtually nothing in it. And it's actually one of my favourite horrors, because again, to me, it feels more psychological. It's set in the daylight, which is traditionally a signifier for safe. It's it kind of throws all the kind of usual horror tropes sort of out on their arse, and I just love it. You watch it and straight away I feel like you can smell sort of rotten flesh and all the flies and everything that are swimming about. And the dinner table scene to this day really scares the shit out of me. It's really it's so creepy and so weird, and I love it, and I don't understand how it's been banned for gore and violence, because to me it's one of the certainly for me, someone who doesn't really like gore and violence, it's a horror film that I can definitely stomach, if you'll pardon the pun, because you don't really see anything. I just think I know it's spanned sort of a million kind of sequels and prequels and whatever, which are probably getting infinitely more graphic and disgusting as they go on. But I think as horror movies go, I think it's really well done. It's really clever, and I'm surprised it was ever banned in the first place, because it's not really gory. And the irony is, of course, the fear of someone copying what they've seen on screen. Well, Leatherface is obviously allegedly based on the serial killer Ed Gein, who did exist long before this movie ever did. So it's not really life imitating art, it's art imitating life. So, but it's one of my favourite horror movies. I know you guys have both seen it as well. So it's just interesting that it was banned for those reasons, because to me it's definitely not that bad. It's quite tame.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, when I first watched it, I was a little disappointed by it because I was expecting so much more. And I was like, really? This is a movie that everybody's kind of like talking about, was banned in that. There is some freaky parts in it, don't get me wrong. There's some pretty kind of like creepy, scary moments, as you should expect for a horror film. But yeah, on the banned list, it's a bit ridiculous.
And I'm just thinking, like, for 1974, was it even graphic for then? There's got to be worse out before that, surely.
Oh, there's bound to have been. Yeah, definitely. I think I've told you this before. I'm not 100% sure, but this was the first film that I watched on video.
Oh, wow.
Back in the early 80s. It was the first video. I'm getting all misty-eyed here now thinking about it. It was a Ferguson video recorder that was the first one that we bought. My mum and dad bought it, and obviously the first thing you do is you go to the video shop, when they had video shops, of course, and get a couple of videos. And this was the first one that we actually got as a family to sit down and watch.
A real wholesome family viewing.
And it was like me, my two sisters, my mum, my dad, and one of my grannies sat and watched the Texas Chainsaw Massacre all together. And it hasn't affected me in any way. I am perfectly normal. But it was like you said, Thomas, it was marketed, or it built up this reputation as being a bit of a video nasty, and it didn't come across that way at all. Yeah, there was some graphic imagery, if you like, but that was more sort of psychological rather than, it wasn't like loads of gore and stuff like that. It was the more of the chat around it that seemed to fuel the fire with this one. But it was a good film. I remember watching and thinking, that's a great film. I need to watch that again. It was really good, But yes, very good choice, Mary.
Interesting sequels as well, I may add.
I've never seen any of them, but I knew you'd be the expert on Texas Chainsaw sequels. So
there's one with Matthew McConaughey, isn't there?
Yeah.
Was that a remake or was that a sequel?
It was a sequel. They brought in some crazy plot that I've not really went in yet. It was to try to kind of explain that like there was some kind of like, was it alien forces controlling Leatherface or something? I can't remember. It was ridiculous.
Jinx.
That should be banned just for being shit, like a shit idea.
If only it was a bureau that could actually stop these things being made in the first place.
I know.
Okay, my first pick is the 1971 Stanley Kubrick film A Clockwork Orange. This was a film that was heavily controversial at the time and was withdrawn voluntarily from British cinemas by Stanley Kubrick in 1972, I believe, on the back of a lot of criticism that the film had received, and the fact that it got brought up in at least 3 court cases where scenes from the film were used to reference crimes that had actually been committed, and they tried to link the film to these crimes, saying there was an influence to it. Based on the book by Anthony Burgess, it's set in a dystopian future where gangs rule, if they like, the young sort of teenage rebellious gangs. It's Malcolm McDowell's in the sort of the lead role of it, and it's him and his gang, the Droogs, who basically do whatever the hell they want, which ranges from robbing and stealing and raping and also in kicking a tramp to death. I think that was one of the highlights of the film, which was brought up in a court case later on. And then it's the rehabilitation of Alex, which is almost as controversial as all the acts that him and his gang actually carried out in the first place. Like I say, this was subject to quite a lot of controversy because of the way that the violence was so casual in it. It was seen as there was no consequences in the first half whatsoever. They got away with it, and they did whatever they wanted. And there's a particular scene in it where they basically carry out a home invasion, and it's an older couple, and they rape the wife, and they are singing in the rain, at the same time while they're doing this. Apparently, this proved to be a little controversial because Gene Kelly hated it. He hated it for two reasons. One, because of the scene itself, and two, because he didn't get paid any royalties for them actually using it in the film. Malcolm McDowell had a story I'd heard a couple of years ago where he said that when he went to Hollywood for the first time, he was at a party and somebody, a mutual friend, introduced him to Gene Kelly, and Gene Kelly just turned his back on him and walked away. He just wouldn't talk to him at all because of that. Probably more to do with the money than anything else, but it was to do with the fact that it was now associated with this particular film in a way that some other music gets associated with particular films, with Reservoir Dogs, for instance, that kind of idea. But yes, I take it both of you will have seen this film since it has been widely available in the UK for maybe about 20 years now.
Do you know I watched it for the first time last year?
Yeah, I think you told me that. Yes, yeah.
Tried reading the book years ago and couldn't understand a word of it, so I couldn't get past the first page. Basically, there was just so many. I was constantly flipping back and forth to the bibliography to see what the kind of words meant, and I think if I stuck with it, it'd have all kind of made sense. But yeah, I wasn't in the mood for it at the time. But I can actually see it from here. I will go back to it at some point. But yeah, I did like the movie when I watched it. I can understand why it was controversial, as you're saying, John, based on the fact that it's incredibly. It's not graphic with its violence, but it's very unsettling.
Yeah, I think it's the callousness of it. I remember my dad telling me at the time, I think he also went to see it in the cinema or whatever, or maybe got a video copy or whatever, and was saying about the court case with the homeless man who was kicked to death, and did a bit of research and read about the other things. And I must admit, I found it really hard to get through in the sense that it is, there's no, as you say, John, there's no consequence for the first half, and these are not likable people in the sense that we were talking about earlier, like Succession. They're just awful. Like, you know, they're free for all in terms of their violence, their cavalier attitude. But then I actually find the kind of famous scene with the eyeball, you know, things with the Peterson, even harder to watch because I've got a real phobia about people touching my eyes, so that really makes me feel sick as well. But I can see why it was banned, because it is violence that's copyable, if you want to put it that way. It's not someone swinging about a chainsaw or wearing a, you know, face of somebody else's face or whatever. I mean, these obviously have happened as well, but the violence in it is so easily replicated in real life, so I can understand why, you know, people maybe got a bit frightened by it. But it's one of those kind of iconic pieces of cinema, isn't it? So
yeah, and I actually watched a film the other day called I Am Hooligan, and it's one of those kind of low budget on Prime football hooligan style films. It is what it is. Yeah, that's all I'll say about it. But the ending of it really riffs heavily on the opening of Clockwork Orange. Right. They're all sitting, and he's even sitting with a glass of milk. We're talking about things that are on the nose. This is very on the nose, and yeah, film still influenced in that aspect. But yeah, I mean, I can see people watching this movie. I can unfortunately see this. I can see copycats from this, based to say, as you say, Mary, Texas Chainsaw, or even Centipedes.
Yeah, it was interesting how, like you mentioned, the milk there. They couldn't tag the film with anything like drug abuse or alcohol or anything like that because they drank milk all the time. And it's interesting to see how the film has actually been rehabilitated over the years, because it is now regarded as being an iconic film, and you see references to it. Like there was the Blur did a video, and they took a lot of images from the Corova milk bar and things like that. And it's been in The Simpsons. Bart Simpson has dressed up like Alec with the eye and the bowler hat.
Oh, it's become a Halloween costume now. Like, I think that's the thing. It's become a kind of iconic Halloween costume. It also, I don't know if this has started the thread of villains drinking milk, but there's a lot of films, and even if you watch The Boys and stuff recently, there's a lot of things where the bad guys drink milk, sort of thing, you know. And
apparently it's in Space Jam, the new Space Jam film. There's Clockwork Orange characters in that.
That's incredible.
In a kids' movie?
It's pop culture now, though, isn't it? It's...
Yeah. Well, they don't need to pay for it. It's a Warner Brothers property, so...
Right. But that's the thing, though, like, you almost feel like it's become the bowler hat and the eyelashes as opposed to understanding, well, you know, I bet there's loads of people or guys, whatever, that dress up like that for Halloween without having never seen the film. But it's the style of it, isn't it? It's very iconic.
Yeah, why let reality get in the way of a good time? wearing a bowler hat.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know what I mean? You got that kind of person that walks up to him and say, "Can you name 3 Malcolm McDowell movies?"
Okay, Thomas, I believe it's you.
My next pick is again a film that when I first watched it, I liked Texas Chainsaw. I was kind of like, is that it? But I've grown to appreciate in later years is The Exorcist, originally released in 1974, which was interesting because when it was given to the BBFC, they passed it. They gave it an X certificate, but they released it, and it wasn't until 1979 they went back and reviewed the film and decided, actually, do you know what? There's things in here we can cut. There's reasons to ban it. And I think it's quite an interesting one because the movie was released and under pressure, they went back and decided to ban it 5 years later. Obviously, in America, you had a lot of kind of religious groups protesting this, and it came with its own marketing campaign where people were reporting to be vomiting, fainting, and things like that, heart attacks even in the cinemas. Over here, though, audiences were kind of like, a bit more nonplussed to it, but it didn't stop the movie again from being banned. They even tried to insinuate that because Linda Blair was young in it, that she might have been vulnerable, and the film could have come under the Protection of Children Act, which came in 1978. Again, I think they were clutching at straws here. They just really wanted to ban this film. So they did, and it was banned until about... Well, it was released in video by Warner Home Video in 1981, and there was no requirement that video should be classified with BBFC at that point. And when that law came in, eventually the film was banned again. I think it was 1999 that the movie actually got released uncut. And again, you watch it and you're thinking, why? Why was this movie banned? It's not real. Yeah, it's quite shocking that, especially the fact the actress's age. I mean, Linda Blair is really young in it, but are we going to get copycats here? Are we going to have people influenced by the movie? Is it degrading people? I mean, the Obscene Publications Act is a very interesting law. If you look it up, I did some at uni in regards to censorship, and I don't know why they banned this movie other than pressure. Personally, I don't think it was a wise decision. It only kind of added legend to it, and then when it did come out, people were kind of like, is this a movie I wasn't allowed to see for like 20 odd years? Again, convention with Texas Chainsaw and things like that, and most films, to be fair, don't really kind of stand the test of time when it comes to that. But yeah, classic horror film though, and unlike a lot of the kind of films that get banned for being overly gratuitous of that, this is a movie that I'm glad did get a proper release because it's a great movie.
I remember my dad saying, and I don't know if it's a publicity stunt or if it was a real thing, that there was priests standing outside the cinema, like begging people not to go and see it. They said it would be bad for your soul and all that sort of thing. I mean, if it was a PR stunt, that's cracking. But I genuinely do believe that there was a lot of pressure from religious groups, obviously, because it was, to do with possession, all that sort of thing. I still haven't seen this film the whole way through because I watch it like this. And I don't know why, because some of the special effects haven't aged particularly well, but there's something about this film that really scares the shit out. I think the spider walk down the stairs in particular really just has me, feeding for my immortal soul. And it scares the crap out of me. I think it holds up. I think it's really well done.
Yeah, it's still a really good story. I watched it last year for the first time in about 10 years or something. And I was disappointed in the effects in it. They have not aged very well at all. But the story, I'm a big boy. I'm growing up. I can put that to the side and just sit and watch the film and enjoy it. And yeah, the story still holds up really well. It's just amazing how much influence this one particular film has had on basically the horror genre for 40, 50 years now. It's incredible that so many people, if you just talk about horror films, the first one they go to is The Exorcist before really anything else. It's amazing. Yeah,
definitely. That's the film as well. It's interesting that this film was banned, but the sequels were still available. And it's became such a pop culture movie as well now. And you've got I got 2 sequels, and it's got a stage play, it's got a TV series. TV series is actually quite good as well. But you can imagine it was still banned though, but all these other parts of it in medium weren't. I mean, the book was. I don't think the book was banned, and that's a scary book. That's a pretty scary book.
Yeah, in the appendix of the book, it gives you the incantations and everything of how to actually carry out an exorcism.
Oh no! Honestly, that's my Catholic schooling being like, nope. I don't need to know any of this. I think, possession horror's become like its own thing, right? Because I mean, there's so many different movies that sort of touch on that. Obviously, we quite like the Conjuring films on this pod and stuff like that as well. But this is still the film that, as I said, despite the fact the effects are a little bit ropey, the pea soup and that sort of thing, it's a film that I still really makes me feel like properly like frightened to my core, because it's just like it's so well done, and like the actors playing the priest and everything, they look terrified, like their reactions and everything are so convincing that you're just like, this could be real. It's really frightening.
Yeah.
Apart from the priest, obviously.
And I can believe that it wasn't publicity stunts with the priest and things like that. But I remember hearing a similar story with Interview with a Vampire. Apparently people were fainting and stuff, but there was ambulances parked outside.
What? But it's not even like there's nothing to it. There's nothing. That seems bizarre. I don't even class that as a horror. It's like a homoerotic thriller. Two dads raising their daughter together. It's not a horror.
No, but it's very bloody though. There's a lot of blood in it, and I think that was what's freaking people out with biting the rats and stuff like that.
For some reason, that doesn't scare me the way that The Exorcist does. But wow, okay, I didn't realise that people were fainting it. That's interesting. My next pick is not a horror at all. It's the Monty Python 1979 movie, The Life of Brian, which, again, my dad was like on a run with like Blazing Saddles and things like that, so I think he introduced me to this around about the same time. It was banned in Norway, the Republic of Ireland, many small towns in America, and in some British cinemas for being blasphemous. Obviously, because the entire premise of the film is that Brian, he's not the Messiah. He's a very naughty boy. The whole point is there was lots of, religious iconography and, obviously being very liberal with their interpretation of the Bible and the story of Christ. I think this is one of the funniest films I think I've ever seen. To me, it's like peak Python. There's the whole scene where they go in to meet the Emperor and he's got the kind of slight speech impediment and he's called Biggest Dickus and his wife's called Incontinentia Bottom, and it's just proper British toilet humour. There's, the cracking sing-along at the end. There's loads of jokes about, the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea and all the rival sort of political groups, and it's just held together by like people who are clearly just enjoying themselves, having fun at work. The performances are funny, like everyone's sort of on top form. And there's just, I understand why religious groups get very upset about it, because obviously Brian is not Christ as they perceive him. But I just think it's one of the funniest films ever made, and it's like Python at their best. I take it you guys have both seen it, yeah?
Yes, I love this film. It's great. It's quite sad that this film got banned more than anything.
Because it's so joyous. It's so much fun, yeah.
I think it was banned particularly in Glasgow, wasn't it? It was banned there for a long time.
Oh, really?
Because, Glasgow City Council is famously run by Catholics. Or they
I thought you were going to say famously devoid of joy, and I was like, yeah,
oh, well, yeah, they're pretty much devoid of joy as well, yeah. But they succumbed to pressure from religious groups, and it was banned in Glasgow for a while, which is just it's unbelievable to think so. And it was long after its cinema release, it was actually banned. But you could like go across the border to like North Lanarkshire and go and see it there. It's crazy.
I think there was actually a Vatican-led. I think this is how high it got. Like, I actually think there's like a Vatican-led campaign, and I'm sure I read that there was a town in Ireland or something like that still had it banned as recently as 1999. Which is absolutely crazy, but it just obviously shows you the grip of, various church communities within, various towns. I can totally imagine the American evangelicals, etc., getting upset about this as well, because obviously it's just a complete piss take. But again, it's funny how when you think of banned films, you always kind of automatically go to the horror genre. When I read that this was banned, I was like, oh, it's perfect to talk about. I absolutely love it. It's like, I still love that scene at the end where he's like, crucifixions, and he's like, nah, they said I could go. He's like, oh, really? Nah, just kidding. I'm here to get crucified, and he just toddles on in. I just love it so much.
No, but you're right. I mean, like, we're kind of talking about kind of banned movies, and it always, especially in the UK, you think you've seen Publications Act, and you think it's kind of like really gory and violent, films likely to corrupt, and then you think of something like Life of Brian, it's a comedy, and people are like, nope, can't be having that. And you've seen the clips online, I'm sure, of like John Cleese and that having debates with people in talk shows and just annihilating people. Without breaking a sweat. It's absolutely farcical. This film is banned. It really is.
Yeah, that's the mistake they make. They think that the people who make these films are idiots. They're stupid. They don't really know what they're talking about. But a lot of the time, they are far more intelligent than the people they're actually up against, especially with some of the religious groups, because they only have one agenda and they can't actually put it across properly. And they get made fools out of so many times. In a way, I think this is one of the films that kind of changed a lot of attitudes towards films, because there was quite a big movement, obviously, in the UK. The Mary Whitehouse led. I can't remember what her actual organisation was, but they were quite big at the time. And
she's referenced in Censor as well. Yeah,
they were able to mobilise an awful lot of people. There was an awful lot of people who had the BBC complaint line on speed dial for things. This is obviously pre-internet days, so you would have to phone up and complain, and they would record. There was 3,600 calls about this particular television programme. But it was the controversy surrounding what is basically a comedy film, I think, changed a lot of people's ideas about what should be banned and what shouldn't be banned. Obviously, it was still horror films. That's a completely different matter. But for something that's a comedy film and it's just given a different point of view on a religious experience, I think that kind of people were saying, well, why are we even, spending time debating this? It should just be up to personal choice. It shouldn't be the fact that you shouldn't be listening to somebody moralising about something that a lot of the cases they hadn't even seen. That's the bizarre thing. They don't watch these things and then they complain about them just because they're professional complainers. Now, we've still got those today, obviously.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's the clip that they actually show in Censor, where it's Mary Whitehouse saying, I don't need to have seen it to know that it's bad for you, sort of thing. And the thing is, we've obviously spoken about, I'm making a choice for my sanity's sake not to watch Human Centipede, and I don't need to see it to know that it's not going to be for me. But that's not because I don't, or because I agree with censorship, or I agree that these films should be banned. I'm just making a choice that for me it's just not going to be my thing. In the same way that I don't watch a lot of movies because they're not going to be my thing, because they have Ewan McGregor in them and stuff like that. So, but it's got nothing to do with being a prude or whatever. John, I think it's down to you. Back to you.
My second choice is the 1925 silent Russian film, The Battleship Potemkin. You can't get much further away from a horror film than this. This film was banned for its political content rather than anything else. Obviously, it came out of Soviet Russia, and it was very much seen by an awful lot of countries as being an incitement to revolution, which, if you've actually seen the film, it kind of does, but that's not quite the point. The film itself centres around the titular battleship Potemkin, and it's the part that it played in its fight against the Russian Empire at the time. Basically, the crew mutinied, and the people of Odessa, where the film had actually docked, came and joined in the protest, and the Russian authorities fought back. This was all set around about 1905, I think it was. It's an absolutely fantastic movie. It's just, I know I keep saying this. I've listened back to a few podcasts that we've actually done, and I keep saying, this is a fantastic movie. It seems to be the cross that I seem to bear on these, but it is. It's so well done. It basically takes you through the various stages of the conflict, how it starts and how the Russian authorities actually react to it. There's a very famous scene, which is the Odessa Steps, which has been referenced so many times, most notably in The Untouchables, the Brian De Palma film. It's terrific. It's horrible the way that it's been shown, people getting trampled and everything like that. It's just, it's absolutely, it's frightening to watch. But it's a really, really powerful message. You can understand why it was banned, because it's the kind of thing that people would use in order to ignite some sort of revolution. The film was banned in the UK till the mid-50s. I think it was like 54 or 55. Yeah, I know, it's completely bizarre. It was felt it was too controversial until the death of Stalin, and because of that, it just wasn't available at all. It was even censored in Germany. It was censored. It was actually censored in Russia at one point as well, because there was a written introduction at the start of the film, and it was Trotsky who wrote it. Now, we all know what happened to Trotsky. He kind of fell out of favour, so therefore they banned it because you had that bit until they managed to re-edit it and take that out and put other stuff in. It's actually the history of it from there is really, really interesting because Eisenstein put the film together with the idea that it was going to be relevant for generations to come. So in order to do that, he envisaged that the soundtrack would change and it would be done again and again. And if you have a quick scan online, you'll see that it's been maybe done like 7 or 8 different times. There's been different soundtracks done to it, some just for live performances, some for, I think there was a 50th anniversary reissue of it as well. There's actually a version of it that was done by the Pet Shop Boys in 2004
Right.
as well. I know, and it's just to make it more accessible to different audiences, to remind them that this film is actually out there, because let's face it, a silent Russian film in black and white may not be the easiest of sells out there. It's just one of these films. This was a film that I saw at Glasgow City Halls about 10 years ago. They had a print of it. It was a big camera sitting at the back of the hall, whirring away, and there was a live orchestra playing as well. It was
amazing.
just fantastic. It was a really good experience. It's something that you don't really get very often, so it was quite something. Have you guys seen this?
Do you know, I'm actually interested if I've seen it all the way through. I know we watched it at uni as part of my Russian film class, and yeah, I did that.
Yeah, just dropping that in there.
Just dropping that in, you know. But I remember specifically the Death of Step scene and just how well it was edited as well. I mean, obviously Eisenstein was really kind of at the forefront of film editing, but for what I remember of the film anyway, I can't remember if I've seen it all the way through. But I remember from it, very, very powerful.
Yeah, I think I got a double dose of it in film studies and in Slavonic studies, and I think what I couldn't get away with was that it was made in 1925 because it feels so fresh and so what, like the editing is so contemporary. And it's funny because I remember having a chat with someone a while ago, and I can't remember who it was, and they were like, "Oh yeah, the really famous Untouchables staircase scene." I was like, "Well, actually, that's from Eisenstein's Battleship Potemkin." And I felt really, really like a proper film student knob for doing that. But I can see why it was banned, because obviously things were very fraught and tense back in that particular era. But it's an amazing film, and honestly, I would love to see it live with a like musical accompaniment. I think it would be absolutely incredible. It's again a kind of iconic piece of cinema, and yet so far back in the timeline. Something
a wee bit different to get banned as well.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like its reasons for being banned is entirely different from like my picks, for example, kind of horror based. You know, it's very good choice, John. Very good choice.
Really good choice. Really good choice.
Very unique one.
Right, Thomas, you're up.
Yeah, I'm just kind of sticking with what I know. So I've went with horror again. I went with Sam Raimi's The Evil Dead, first seen by the BBFC in August 1982. Now, apparently, the idea of this film being banned, when you think back about it, is quite ridiculous, I think. I keep saying that about a lot of these films, but I got The Evil Dead free with the paper one Sunday. And this movie was actually classed as a video nasty. And apparently, at the time, there was a divided opinion on the movie, where some people thought it just found it nauseating, while others thought it was a bit tongue-in-cheek. Come on, really, is this something that's really going to kind of corrupt people? They got some stuff cut, and they gave it a certificate originally. But at the time the movie was released, this was the height of the video nasties thing, and they went back and looked at it, and it turned out shops were getting raided, and copies of this were getting seized.
Really?
And you think about what the Evil Dead films became. I mean, the second one's a kind of quasi-remake of the first one, stroke sequel. A lot more tongue-in-cheek, a lot more humour, and the third one's just a comedy by that kind of stage. And again, it goes back to my point earlier. The idea of being able to see sequels to the original film's banned, I don't know, it just seems a bit kind of strange to me. There is scenes in this film that I can understand that were cut, especially the woman that gets raped with a tree, for lack of a better description. It's insane. That's been released uncut now, and when you watch it, it's quite a shocking scene. Is that enough to ban the film? I wouldn't say so. Apparently, Mary Whitehouse, an old friend who we're talking about here, called this the number one nasty, The Evil Dead.
Really?
I mean, really?
Cannibal Holocaust was palatable for her then, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it took until 2000 for the uncut version was resubmitted to BBFC, and they realised standards had changed quite a lot, so they released it uncut. And I think I've got the uncut version, like I said, free with the paper, of all things. It's just...
That's such a random DVD giveaway, I have to say.
I got Hellraiser as well, actually. I got 3 copies of Hellraiser because of that. The capsule, it was this horror theme they had. I would say it was in News of the World or something like that. They were releasing films every week. I know, it's weird, but there you go. That's it.
You have it as well?
Yep.
That's hilarious.
I take it, but obviously I know you've seen it, John. You just showed us that your copy for those listening at home. Mary, you've seen it?
No, I've seen clips of it, either or maybe watching the Red Letter Media when they do like their horror stuff. To me, from what I've seen, it does seem quite tongue in cheek. I'm not looking at it going, oh, I mean, I bet you there is lots of like scares and kind of controversial moments or whatever. But to me, is it not kind of like, I don't want to say like political commentary, but was it not kind of like social sort of commentary on sort of issues at the time, or am I getting confused with something else?
You think the Night of the Living Dead?
Oh, that's what I'm thinking of. Okay. Just scratch all of this on the record. I've not seen it. I'm talking shit.
The Night of the Living Dead had a lot of kind of social commentary to it, and I don't think Evil Dead did. I could be wrong, but I don't think it did. It's insane. It's an insane movie, though. It's very, very violent. It's very, very gory, but it's also very cartoonish in its violence. I don't think it's the idea that this was a video nasty. It's a bit mad. It would make you think it's a totally different film than what it is when you watched it. I prefer the second one personally, but yeah, it's a great film. I didn't like the remake, to be honest. I didn't like the remake too much, and interestingly enough, the remake is probably what people thought this film was. A really violent, serious horror, but this is just, it's balls to the wall, it's mental.
It's one of the sort of prototype horror films, isn't it? Sort of the standard set of characters.
Yeah, Cabin in the Woods.
Cabin in the Woods, teenagers, all this sort of stuff. So yeah, it's been done so many times since then, but this is one of the first ones. What I remember from watching it just recently, I think I watched it maybe last year or year before, how cheaply it was made.
Yeah,
but that didn't detract from the film at all. It was obviously a very, very low budget. You're talking about virtually no budget at all on this thing, but it works really well because it's a cracking story, and yeah, there is a certain like tongue-in-cheek element to it, but they're all very serious about what they're doing, in terms of the filmmaking and everything. They wanted to put something out there that really worked very, very well, and I think they achieved that on the money that they had. Like I say, the second one was kind of the same in terms of the storyline and everything, but it wasn't the same film because it didn't have the same sort of feel to it. The first one was very, very gritty.
There's a rights reason or something about it, because the first like 5 to 10 minutes of Evil Dead 2 is essentially a reimagining of the first film.
I'm not sure about that, but yes, yeah, you're right. It's very similar, but I haven't read up on it or anything, so I don't really know.
I did know that, and I can't remember what it is, but it's weird, maybe, because you get the first film and it ends at this kind of cliffhanger, and then the second film retells the same story but with less actors. It's just Bruce Campbell.
So does it like pick up from where the first one left off, or
no? It does that like 5 to 10 minutes in.
Oh,
it just basically it remakes the first movie in the first 5 to 10 minutes, but rather than all these friends go to the cabin, it's just like a guy and his girlfriend, and then it picks up. There's a reason for it. I can't remember why. Yes, and then the third one's just a comedy. There's no getting away from it.
Oh jeez. Was it meant to be, or?
Yeah, no, it's definitely. Okay. I mean, there's a bit when like it's not spoiling, but he's got Necronomicon, the book to kind of like banish the dead back to hell, and he's got this phrase he has to say, and he can't remember it. So as he's saying the phrase, he kind of coughs the last word, hoping he gets away with it.
That is funny. That is really good.
It's great. It's really good. I mean, the first movie's great. It really is. The second one's great. They're all good films. A great trilogy. It's definitely worth watching. Yeah. Especially the second one, with Bruce Campbell's Ash becomes more the iconic hero that we know him as from pop culture with the chainsaw arm and things like that. It's nuts.
Yeah, the comedy one sounds probably more up my street than anything else. But
you could skip the first one and just watch the second one, to be fair.
I was going to say, because it will tell me the story in the first 10 minutes anyway, so I'm covered. Yeah, I'll need to, again, I'll add that to the list. But I genuinely have been working my way through lists of things like that I said I'd watch, i.e., Succession and things like that. So I will go on it. My last pick is a kind of comedy of sorts. It was billed as a comedy of terrors. It's the 2017 Armando Iannucci film, The Death of Stalin, which was banned by the Ministry of Culture in Russia for being offensive and extremist, which the offensive bit, I understand. They probably don't like their, history having the piss ripped out of it, but extremist, no idea where that's come from. Obviously, the title of the film is self-explanatory. It tells the story of when Stalin died, and straight from the outset, you're met with this thing where, a lot of his advisors come into the room and they're like, well, is he dead? Should we get a doctor? Oh, no, that's right. All the doctors are in concentration camps because we outlawed that as a profession. And there's this kind of thing where nobody really wants to say that he's dead. And of course, you're brought in with all these different personalities. You've got Jason Isaacs absolutely steals the show, as the general, and he throws off his cape and he's got his thick Yorkshire accent and he's just not here for any shit. He's just here for the buffet. And I love the whole ridiculousness and over the top kind of situation that it is. Stalin's kids are a mess. Andrea Riseborough and Rupert Friend, one's an alcoholic and one's an absolute, hysterics all the time. Nobody really wants to be a successor because they're a little bit worried that they might get bumped off. And there's obviously a lot of inner politics going on as to who should be in charge. And it's almost like a kind of Monty Python type thing. And if you've watched, Iannucci or The Thick of It or anything like that, you'll know this is very much his type of humour. I just thought it was interesting as to, Russia obviously has had quite a turbulent history and quite interesting politics over the century or so, and I'm surprised that the current Ministry of Culture found offence in this because it's Putin's been in charge for a long time, Stalin's been out of the picture for a long time, so I'm surprised they kind of took offence to it. But I just think it's funny how even now there's still certain things that are off limits for some cultures and some countries, and they just won't be made fun of for whatever reason. But I love this movie. I think it's really clever. I think it's really well done. Have you guys both seen it?
Yeah, I love this film.
Yeah, it's cracking.
They also banned Borat for being extremist as well. So just to put it in the context of The Death of Stalin and Borat are kind of viewed as the same by the Russian Ministry of Culture. But I could watch this film again and again and again. It's got such a great cast and it's very, very clever and very well executed because it does kind of balance the whole Berrier's doing a roundup. If you get a wee chap at the door tonight, you should be scared sort of thing with the absolute ludicrousness of Russian bureaucracy at the time. But I was just surprised to see that was on a banned list somewhere.
I was surprised to hear that, especially with how current it is as a movie. I'm trying to think what's in it, and I don't know, when I watched it as a kind of films I thought was genuinely hilarious.
Yeah.
But also really dark. But not at the same time. It done really well to not make you feel bad for laughing. Or laugh at inappropriate thing. You want to laugh at the right parts and then feel sickened at the right parts. And I thought it was a brilliant film. I loved it.
Yeah, it's really good, isn't it? My favourite scene is the bit where Stalin is lying in state and they're all jockeying for position about where they want to stand. And then somebody says, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. And he says, smell, shake hands and try not to call them a cunt. I think that's words to live by.
Really good.
Yeah. Oh, you can understand why Russians would get offended by it because it doesn't sort of treat it seriously in some aspects of it. Some of them are. So there's some real horrific aspects to the film, but some of them are treated quite lightly. So
I was wondering if that's what it was. If it was like the lack of reverence for. I mean, ultimately, a major political figure in their history, and I wonder if it was that kind of lack of respect, maybe, that was the driving force behind the ban.
Possibly, yeah. It was interesting as well that Child 44 was banned in Russia.
That doesn't surprise me either. Yeah,
I think more the accent than any other part of that film.
I'm surprised Black Widow hasn't been banned in Russia for Ray Winston's accent.
No, does he attempt a Russian accent?
Only every third word.
Yeah, not the entire scene, not even the entire sentence.
Is it as bad as that Charlie Hunnam one you sent me? Because I was crying and I actually had tears streaming down my face. I mean, that was awful. I thought, as I say, as we talked about, I thought the Sons of Anarchy accents were ropey at points, depending on who was talking. But that accent, the attempted Cockney, I mean, he made Dick Van Dyke look really good.
Yeah, he made Dick Van Dyke look like Daddy Dyer.
John, you are to round us all off.
Charming.
Oh.
My last choice is a very recent one. It's the 2020 film The Hunt, which has been described as a horror film, but I don't actually know if that's really the case. It's sort of a thriller horror. The reason that is controversial, I don't think it was ever banned anywhere, but it was controversial because it was due to come out, I think it was 2019, late 2019, and it was pulled because the subject of the film is people who are basically hunting other human beings. They call them the deplorables, and it's basically conservative, right-wing, moneyed people who are hunting people for sport. And of course, the people they are hunting for sport are ordinary Joes, regular people, people from different ethnic minorities and stuff like that. And this came at a time where there were a number of high-profile shootings in America. I know there's always shootings in America, but there was a number of them that were very, very high profile. A lot of people had been killed. And the film company itself decided that it wouldn't be an idea to actually release this film then, so they held it off for a couple of months and then released it. And of course, it was still as controversial at the time. It was an interesting film in that the best known person, the best known actor, was killed off within the first 10 minutes in the film, and you're kind of thinking, whoa, it's almost going back to that Fear Street thing as well. Basically, when something happens, you go, oh, right, okay, anything can happen from this point. You don't know where it's going to go, and it pretty much did. The film itself was okay. It kind of played out in exactly the way that you thought it would. The twists weren't really twists, but they were good. It was all right. It was an enjoyable enough film. It did kind of play on certain aspects of the kill the poor, all this sort of stuff. It's kind of laboured on that a number of times, much to its detriment. But it kind of got away with it, and it was a feeling. And I'm not going to say enjoyable here because, I mean, can you enjoy a film where they're actually killing other people for sport? You know, but I suppose Jean-Claude Van Damme was in one. It was kind of similar as well. So, you know, there's all sorts out there. So, yeah, that is my pick. And I know you have both seen this film, haven't you?
Yeah, we discussed it on the pod. I actually thought this got banned because Donald Trump complained about it. So I didn't know that was the reason why it was banned. I thought just Donald Trump didn't like the way Republicans were portrayed. And it was close to maybe like an election time or a primary or something like that. And I thought that was the reason behind it. So I didn't realise it was to do with the shootings. So
yeah, no, there was pressure from Conservatives at the time to get it banned for that very reason, because it didn't show them in a good light. And let's face it, it's always in an election cycle in America for something, isn't it? Because they have major elections every 2 years. So, well, obviously with Senate races as well as obviously the White House and Congress and all that. But yeah, there was an awful lot of talk about it at the time, and I think it was an awful lot of talk from people who hadn't actually seen the film, because on the poster for the film it says the most talked about movie of the year is one that no one has actually seen.
Yeah,
so,
I remember
there you
that.
go.
I remember that. Donald Trump probably tweeted about it in capital letters. Do not watch this movie.
Yep. Yes, so I don't know if you've got anything else to say about it anyway, because obviously I had actually forgotten we had talked about this. It's just terrible. Anyway.
If you want to know more about our thoughts on The Hunt, check us out on the Moviescramble archives from last March, I think that was. That was one of the last films I seen in the cinema before the pandemic.
I watched it on Prime at home. I had to pay to watch it on Prime because I think it was released maybe at the same time at home because I couldn't get to the cinema, I seem to remember.
Yeah, that's right. I think in fact, that might have been the last film I did see before. It was that. I'm sure I done a double bill with that and Sonic.
You did. I remember you talking about that and being like, what the fuck?
Hey, the Sonic film was actually really good.
Yeah, it came out the 11th of March last year, so yeah, it could well have been.
March, April time. Check it out, the archives. I think that's us for selections, and that was quite an interesting mix, I would say. Mm-hmm. There was some horror films to be expected, but also some comedies and some class and culture from John with a Battleship Potemkin. So,
yeah, sorry about
that. Class to be expected, standard. We do have some submissions for this topic from our Twitter feed, our Twitter followers, I should say. First off, I've got Alan Douglas at @Douglas_1981. He's went with Battle Royale, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Natural Born Killers, A Clockwork Orange, and The Exorcist. Now, we've mentioned 3 of those movies. We mentioned Battle Royale quite a lot on here. Natural Born Killers, that's an interesting one.
Was it banned, or is it just kind of...
Well, he did say controversial.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realise, obviously very controversial, but I was kind of assuming it was banned.
I think it was one that's release was delayed because of the controversy surrounding it. Again, it to do with shootings and various things like that. And it was Tarantino, obviously. He was the bad boy at that point. So
Interesting. I talk about controversial films. We could have mentioned The Matrix in terms of the fact that the Columbine massacre, and they believed that a film had an influence on it because they wore trench coats. Allegedly, turned out it didn't. That's another story. We also have Mark Flood at Mark the Shark 96. He's got Clockwork Orange, Last House on the Left. That's a very good one. Evil Dead and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And he also once heard Mark Kermode tell a great story about how BBFC couldn't cut Chainsaw because there's almost no blood in it.
There you go.
We have one more from a good friend of mine and the pod, Gabriel Robertson, at Writer Gabriel on Twitter. He just said Cannibal Holocaust. I think I have seen this, but I can't remember anything about it. Is this the one that's basically like a found footage movie before found footage movies were a thing?
Yeah. I think I haven't seen it, but yes, it is a found footage film. It's one that gets referenced quite a lot when they talk about the Blair Witch Project, when the first big found footage film. You get horror geeks coming on and saying, "Oh no, actually, it was Cannibal Holocaust." Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've seen clips of it because, like, occasionally, if I maybe watch, like, a top 10 most, controversial or whatever films, whatever, on YouTube, I've seen clips of it, and I think this is going to make me sound like an idiot, but I'll say it anyway. Was it controversial because people couldn't understand that found footage was still like actors and acting? Like, did it seem too real? Was that?
Well, the thing is, especially with the Blair Witch Project, was, I mean, this is kind of the early stages of the internet and stuff, and people did believe it was real. These actors weren't known. You hadn't seen them in anything else. Cannibal Holocaust, however, I don't think anybody was really buying that one. It's been
just asking the question.
Footage. Yeah, it's possible, but yeah, I think that film is. It's been so long since I've seen it. I can't remember much about it at all.
Yeah, they need another 6 or 7 sequels before you would get interested.
That's true. It's very true.
The Cannibal Holocaust box set with a glitzy inlay.
Yes. I'm gonna check that actually when we come off the pod. I'm gonna Google Cannibal Holocaust sequels and see what comes up. Well, I hope you all enjoyed our latest podcast. We reviewed the movie Censor, spoke about most controversial and banned movies. You could find us on social media at all the usual places: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, at Moviescramble. John, the email address, please.
podcast@moviescramble.co.uk. It's really blown up on the last couple of weeks. We've had no messages whatsoever. I'm just making it up as I'm going along now.
If you would like to,
so excited.
I know, so that I thought I was better. We're going to say like 2 or something. If you would like to discuss anything in particular on the podcast, was any kind of themes or genres or movies you would like to hear us talk absolute nonsense about, please get in touch with us at one of those available channels, and we will do our best to get back to you. As you know, we're just so busy with the plethora and volume of emails and like social media pinging. My phone's been going non-stop during this whole podcast just from the Moviescramble Twitter account alone. But yes, please get in contact with us if there's anything you want to discuss, even if it's just today's podcast or any other previous podcasts. And we have discussed having guests on, so we will look into that and we will put the feelers out. And you might find yourself unlucky enough to be sitting with us to discuss Cannibal Holocaust 7.
Yeah. Holocaust on the buses.
Holocaust. electric Holocaust Boogaloo. That's all from me. Is that all from you, John?
It is, yeah. See you later.
Mary?
That is all from me. Until next time.
Bye, all. Cheers.